Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of Princess State of Mind, where we talk about fiction, fairy tales, and the fairer sex. I'm really excited about this show. So back in March, an affiliate of Planned Parenthood tweeted out, "We need a Disney princess who's had an abortion," among other things. And that made a lot of people upset, including me. And I wrote an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal about why no, we actually do not need a Disney princess who's had an abortion. But it turns out that there is actually somebody who is much more qualified than I am to discuss this topic. She is a pro-life princess, and she wrote an article called "I Was a Disney Princess and Had an Abortion." Her name is Deanna Falchook, and she is here with us today. Hi, Deanna.
Hi. So excited to be here with you, Faith, because I remember the article that you wrote, and it was so good.
Oh, well, thank you. I was so excited to hear from you after that article. I feel like otherwise we never would have connected, and you obviously have much more credibility on answering this question than I do. So I think we should just kind of take people through this. So first, can you just tell us, what do you mean when you say that you were a Disney princess?
Okay, so when I was 18, I received a job because I'm a singer. I was a singer at Disney World. And I worked in front of the Disney Castle in a group called Kids of the Kingdom. And during that time when I was there, and I was just 18, I was also asked many times to sing with Cinderella's voice in their studio underneath, and then also Sleeping Beauty and other princesses. So I did a lot of recordings. And then on stage, while I didn't dress in full princess attire, I actually sang the voice in the live shows. And then, of course, during like New Year's and holidays, sometimes I'd be in the audience and watch actually Cinderella singing with my voice coming out of her. So in a sense, I was a Disney princess, and I worked there for a couple of years, and I love Disney. I will say I always had wanted to be a princess. Princesses meant a lot to me, especially Cinderella. And getting that job there was very meaningful to me, because Cinderella had always been somebody that I had gone to even as a little child for escape and really for comfort, and in having this bold belief that, you know, I could kind of escape the ashes of my life, you know, and so that's how I ended up there. And do you want me to go ahead and kind of tell a little bit about how I
actually, before we keep going with the story,
yeah.
I want to talk to you about Cinderella, and I want to talk to you about everything that happened. But let's just back up for 1 second, because I definitely want to know, how does someone get a job like that? And what was your sort of day-to-day life like? Like you're saying you were under the stage singing while someone else was being Cinderella on the stage? Or?
No, I was on the stage daily, like 5 different times, at least every single day. So I'll tell you a little bit about it. Basically, Disney at that time, it was in the 80s. They went out on these audition searches for live performers for a group called Kids of the Kingdom, with 5 guys, 5 girls, to sing and dance these shows, these live shows, sort of as a teenage and young adult version of the Mouseketeers. Gotcha. And so I auditioned. I was actually living in New York City at the time. I had moved there from Illinois. I had moved to New York City, and I auditioned. I was living in the Webster apartment. It's all women's dorm. And I auditioned for this job, and I was so excited to get it as a teenager. And that's how I got the job. So I was thrilled. And then once I started, there were a lot of rehearsals. We had a few different shows that we would do. We would also tour. We had to be pixie dusted when we came in there. In other words, we needed to know the culture of Disney. We needed to know basically, you know, how many dwarves and that, that kind of.
Is that a technical term? You pixie dusted?
Yeah, they said, amazing. Hey, it's time to you're going to be pixie dusted, and that, I don't know if they still use that terminology, but at the time that was orientation.
Amazing.
So, and then day to day, I mean, we were off, I think, once or twice a week, but I would perform or rehearse in front of the castle. Sometimes we were in Tomorrowland. Sometimes I would be in a parade, but mainly it was in front of the castle, and singing, you know, like When You Wish Upon a Star, you know, Someday My Prince Will Come, all of these things. And then on occasion, I would go in the studio, which was underground in Disney. at Disney World and sing and record, and they would use those recordings for some of their other shows where somebody would mouth it. But I was a singer and a dancer, and I would sing live when I was on stage.
That sounds like a fantastic job, and it sounds like awesome. Yeah, it sounds like you loved it. And so it sounds like while you were working there, you got pregnant and had an abortion. So can you take us through what happened, what your sort of decision-making process was, and what your sort of state of mind was right afterwards?
Yeah. So when I had been there a short amount of time, and first off, getting that job there was such a big honor, like a huge, huge honor. My background was such that I was raised, and this is relevant for my decision, I was raised with an awesome single mom, and I was the youngest of 4 girls. I also was pretty much raised by my grandmother's sisters, who all were amazing independent women, but they didn't realize that, you know, the best thing that they wanted to pour into me as a child was, you know, you can be anything you want. Why do you want to be a mother? And one of the scenes that I remember very, very clearly was that I was hanging out, playing with my sister and somebody else, and my Aunt Claire, my grandmother's sister, said to me, she says, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "I want to be a mother." And she said, "You could be anything you want. Why would you want to be a mother?" I would be like, "But I want to be a mom." You know, I mean, I had a very disruptive family, so my desire was to have that type of life.
Right.
And she kept relentlessly asking me, sweet woman, but strong. And my sister came by and said, "I'm going to be a pilot like Amelia Earhart or a doctor." And then so I changed my answer. I said, "Okay, I'm going to be a singer." And I realized that throughout my life, up to that point, there were always these messages of, you know, you have to wait to be a mother until everything is perfect. Then you get to decide when that happens. And in hindsight, the messaging came from them wanting to hear all of this huge, you know, Margaret Sanger rhetoric that was around at the time. So how did I make the decision? I'm 18. I get this great job. Everybody's applauding me. And I'm singing and I'm performing. In my deepest heart, I want to get to that place where I can be a mother. I get pregnant because I meet this guy, and I wanted the baby. I did. But at the same time, I also was conflicted because I knew that message. And I knew that as a woman, I had the right to have an abortion. I didn't think anybody could support me financially. The guy I was dating was, you know, not really into being a young father. And so I went and I had an abortion and thought, like everybody said, because there was before ultrasounds, you know, okay, it's a blob of tissue. You know, it's not a big deal. You'll go off and have another baby. And it wasn't that for me. I mean, it was a bunch of lies. And I went in and I had an abortion on, like, I think it was like a Friday, and I had to come back on a Monday. And I sat and I laid in the fetal position all weekend, crying, realizing, whoa, this is not what happened. And I spent several months performing still, trying to be able to smile my Cinderella happy smile and sing about dreams coming true in happy places. But I was crushed. I could barely stand. Like the grieving took such a toll on me that I could barely dance. So that's the context of how that happened.
Right. First of all, thank you for telling us that story. That's an amazing thing for us to know, because I think still girls are getting that message that you're describing. You know, that message of you can't, you know, motherhood is something that happens once you've done all of these other things. And I think that, you know, it's so powerful what you're saying, that was your dream. You wanted to be a mother. And I think that, you know, we sometimes forget that is an acceptable life choice, you know, that's not that's not an afterthought. And I think that's such a powerful message. And the other thing, you know, that you said that really struck me was, you know, was it just sort of the act of having the abortion that changed your mind about the baby being a clump of cells versus a baby? Like, did you emerge from that experience feeling differently about that?
You know, I went in and it all happens so fast. They kind of make it happen fast. It's like, okay, you go for the pregnancy test, then schedule this, get it done as soon as possible. If you wait too long, like everything happens so fast that while I was sitting there with all of these women around, then they give you a pill, which I think is just to kind of chill you out. But I thought it was something that was like almost like an abortion pill. So it was like almost during the process, before it even happened, I had this desire to leave. And so after the fact, when I saw these women around, and I just sort of felt this dullness and this longing, like, wow, I'm not pregnant anymore. A second of a relief. I mean, to be honest, it's sort of like, phew. And then it was just like, whoa, now, no. What, so did I change my mind regarding it being a clump of cells? Yes, I started to like evaluate that, but it was more the overall, that was just part of my decision, like the clump of cells thing. Right. And I think people who are leaning in that direction kind of want to hear what they want to hear, but the truth is that there wasn't any advanced ultrasounds or anything, but at the same time, it was just, I was indoctrinated. And I mean, I was indoctrinated from the time I was a child to that moment. But when you have an abortion and you have regret, you are convinced that it's all you. Like, and that is very important for women to know, that many of them don't find their healing because there's such guilt and shame, and it's a process, and they don't tell you that. They don't tell you about the psychological issues. I mean, I just read an article about Penny Marshall, who had an abortion, and she said that was her greatest regret in life.
Right. I mean, it does seem that there are a lot of many women who regret it, and I think that's not sort of publicized enough, because I think, and it's really powerful what you're saying too, that, it's not about blame, for yourself, right? It's just about kind of the mindset and the sort of world that you were living in that kind of made that a choice for you. Yeah. And so, I think, so we're going to get to all of the amazing things that have happened to you since then. And it's an amazing sort of story of redemption, I guess. But I'm wondering, you said you went back to work and it was sort of like you couldn't go on doing this. And I'm wondering, back to the Planned Parenthood tweet, for example, what is it about a Disney princess that is incompatible with abortion?
I think if you ask any child who has never heard of the concept of abortion, if it would be a princess or a witch that would go into a human being and rip a baby out, would their answer be a princess? And it's easy to say, well, that's because they've all been told this. No, I think it's natural to understand that our sense of royalty and exceptional nature as women, our royal aspect of being, wonderfully made, of being jewels in the crown of the King of Kings, we get that innately. And so you have to go, I can understand why they would want to do it, because you have to reprogram the very minds of children that far back for them to really try to grasp. And you would have to turn them into some kind of evil children because they're innocent by nature. So they have to indoctrinate. So obviously for me, it hit a nerve, because princesses, they're like slaying dragons to save, like a forest of frolicking deer. It's just, princesses are making their way through the fire and finding their way, because they are so special that a king and a prince would look to the servant girl in the village and offer an invitation to the ball to find the worthy, destined person to make their way into becoming the future leader and queen, right? Princesses endure a lot, work a lot. And so I think what bothers me about feminists in let's say not pro-life feminists, because there's an aspect of us that, I consider myself, I guess, a pro-life feminist. But the thing is that they want us to believe that women that strength comes from planning, annihilating things, doing what we want when we want, you know, being able to just, you know, it's all about us. It's all about us. And motherhood is not about us. Now, I know, and so we have to like plan the motherhood as well, right? So the thing is that princesses go through a process. Why is, and I keep talking about Cinderella, but we could break down every princess if you want. Cinderella, why is she so special? She was an orphan, basically. I mean, her dad went away. Some say he came back, some say he died. So, you know, but she's basically placed in around these women that are, you know, renaming her into something dirty because, you know, like dirty orphan girl. They're making her work for them. And so you see all, you know, and then they basically try to hold her away from her destiny. So the feminists will tell you that, oh, well, she could never be queen because, you know, I hate that story because, oh, she let a guy save her. I don't see it that way. If you really break it down, she was somebody that endured the fire. She defied them by going and insisting on her destiny. She sang through the smoke during the season of like creating fires for these people. She was the most resourceful. She was the most positive. And the thing is, nobody else could fit that shoe because it had her DNA on it. She was designed to fall into that position. And so the stories that I see with princesses, especially the fairy tale princesses, is that these are the reason they're the most feminist, truly, purely feminist literature that we have out there. Because what they do is they show us that as women, we are designed and created for greatness, that we can rule, that we can overcome our stuff, but there's a process. So, you know, the kind of radical, or let's say more the abortion feminists, want us to believe that we can become, you know, a queen. But by the way, God forbid you have to go through labor and push. God forbid you have to go through your season in the ashes. God forbid if you get pregnant, oh my gosh, and you have to go through an unplanned pregnancy. Let me tell you something. The women that I know who've gone through those unplanned pregnancies, even the very young ones, will say, you know what? I do not regret this. But how many people have I come across that said, I keep dreaming about the baby I could have had? So, I mean, I didn't know that obviously at the time. I didn't really put much thought into it, but I have had to review and for my own healing, kind of think about this. And prior to getting on that stage, I knew Cinderella. Women, I've discovered that women know their princesses. Like they're all experts because it's part of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, what you're saying, especially about Cinderella, and I think, you know, we can talk more about Cinderella too, because I think she is, for a lot of people, she's their princess. You know, she's this kind of iconic image of this transformation from, you know, the rags to the beautiful ball gown. And I always sort of say that, you know, feminists get so angry about that story because they think it's about sort of shoes and a dress. You know, they think it's about how, you know, she goes to the ball and he's like, wow, nice dress. And, you know, let's get married. But I think for me, it's a story in which a person who was always beautiful on the inside is magically allowed to wear her beautifulness on the outside in the shape of a dress and some sparkling shoes. And that's what the prince sees when he looks at her. He sees her inside made manifest. And I think, you know, kind of what you're saying too is like a princess who had an abortion and shouted her abortion wouldn't be the ideal of sort of inner goodness. It would have to be, if a princess had an abortion, I think it would have to be a mistake that she then kind of regretted and worked to move on from. I mean, do you think, like, is there a way that a princess could have an abortion? Is there a story like that, or no?
Okay, so I want to just answer one other thing regarding what you said regarding the dress. Here's the thing. Again, I'm talking about the process. I love the story of Cinderella so much because she is in the fire. That's ashes, right? Ashes. How do diamonds start to sparkle? They're in the fire and the heat of the internal earth, right? So I love that she goes from this fire. And so the sparkling to me, when she, like, even in some of the animated ones where she's like turning around, is relevant because it's it's supernatural, and it's miraculous, but it also makes sense because it's so natural that it's supernatural, if that makes sense, because she turns into sparkles. So that's how she gets the sparkles. It's not just, okay. So, and what's wrong with beauty? I mean, she becomes, even like you said, outer manifestation of her beauty, but it was really because of the internal. So that's that. And then do I think that a princess could have had an abortion and then, a person could have an abortion, become a Disney princess or a princess, and there could be a story about that. Now, I'm not saying this to toot my own horn, but I'm talking about like what God has done in my own life, and I feel like that could be the Disney story.
Absolutely,
it's somebody in. Is it okay if I kind of talk about my family and what happened since then?
Yes.
Okay, so I had I think if a princess kind of comes to the conclusion of, oh my gosh, that was, how I like the pain and the struggle. Obviously stories kind of have to have that, the pain and the struggle of the sadness and being transformed. For me, it was that in my faith with God and praying and feeling and knowing that I was blessed and redeemed. At that point, that redemption story, because all of the great stories have this redemption piece. How do you go from the ashes or from the bottom, like of where you can't even stand, you don't even have your legs anymore. We know there's some princess stories about that. So you don't even have and then all of a sudden you are able to move forward. So for me, I was healed through just coming to, just understanding this more. And God blessed me with a baby girl named Samantha by birth. And then when I brought her to Disney the first time when she was 5, the first time after leaving my job there, I ended up in that day just being so grateful to God. Like, I could not believe that I had this daughter. And if nothing else happened, I would have been like so grateful. Well, 48 hours that I was there, I ended up conceiving my son. Amazing. At Disney World. Like, well, not in Disney World, but so there's that story. And then years go by, I have these 2 children, and I felt really called again to adopt. And so since that time, I've adopted 1 daughter from Guatemala. She was a baby at the time, 3 children from Ethiopia, and 1 from the Ukraine. And now we live near Disney. So I feel like that's like a great story. It's my true life, but and there is a remnant of this abortion that, even though I know I'm healed, there is a remnant and a scar and a wounding that I believe that God is using for good, and that's what he uses. And that is what is there for every single story that you find, that it's like their disability or their tragedy is what turns it around to be able to help other people to transcend that. And so I believe with people who have aborted, who have had an abortion and that go through that healing process, it took a lot. It took admitting to kind of what went on, going through therapy, understanding the culture that we're in, because it was media, and we'll get back to that played an important role in my choosing abortion. It wasn't just me. When I went through the healing, they were like, fill in a pie, as far like a pie chart, as whose fault it was. And at first the whole thing was me. And she goes, are you sure? I said, well, I'll give the guy, the father of the baby a little. She's like, are you sure? I was like, well, I did want to be a mom. And then my, the messaging from my great aunt. And then it was just like, well, if it wasn't legal, I wouldn't have. Like I realized that, oh my gosh, I was manipulated partially, into this decision. I made the decision, but I was manipulated. So go back now to this tweet. I know that. I hadn't written about my abortion experience for years. I'm like writing about adoption. I'm just kind of living my life, talking about wellness. Like, that's it. And my friend calls me. She's like, did you see the tweet? I'm like, what tweet? So it hit a nerve to me, because it's me as a child, a little girl wanting to be a mom, singing Cinderella songs. I start to get inundated with this messaging. And when it comes my time, what do? I'm in front of a castle performing. That's my dream. And I abort a baby. So this tweet was personal. but it was also personal because I'm a mother, and it was sort of like, and I'm healed from it now. So I'm like, oh no, this is no. And so that's where that came from, that sort of that passion that I had for writing that response.
Right. And I'm so glad you did write it, because it's so important, I think, for people to hear that story. And that's kind of something I wanted to ask you too, is why do you think that organizations like this Planned Parenthood affiliate and all of these kind of feminists who talk about this idea that, you know, Disney princesses should have an abortion or do all these other kinds of, you know, crazy things, why do you think that they want to co-opt princesses instead of eradicate them? Why are they saying, you know, let's make a Disney princess who, you know, is, you know, whatever, you know, had an abortion, you know, let's do this to the Disney princess, let's do that, instead of just like, hey, these Disney princesses are outdated, they're anti-feminist, let's get rid of them, let's have new characters. Why aren't they doing that?
Faith, that is, like, I just have to give you kudos. That is one of the best questions anybody's ever asked me, because it's not just like, why are they targeting the princesses? It's like, why don't they just get rid of them? Right. So I've become somewhat of a Disney expert in many ways, because I used to work there, and I live right next to Disney. This is what I do. And actually, Walt Disney, when he first started creating animated features, they were trying all these other types of things just with Mickey Mouse or whatever. It wasn't until the Princess series that things started to really roll, right? Mm-hmm. Then there was sort of like this, I can't remember what they called it. It was the dark season of Disney, where there were hardly any movies, right? And then what happens? The Little Mermaid comes, and, you know, so it's princesses sell. Princesses sell, right? So, and why do they sell? Because, like I said, it's in our DNA. Now, here's another interesting fact. We are consuming more media these days than we ever have. Right now, you and I get to have our own television show by clicking on buttons and just getting online. Yep. And then there's like gaming, there's social media. So anybody who wants to sell an idea or anything has a great opportunity to be able to manipulate the psyche of people in order to sell stuff. Planned Parenthood and abortion is money-making. They will say they're not, but we know that they're making money, right? But also the concept of, you know, these ideas of just, you know, women, and, you know, there's a lot of money to be made. So we're also living in a time where they actually there's these psychometrics where they can actually study even our eyes. They call them like, I think it's called visual rhetoric, like where do our eyes look, and, you know, and whether it's in gaming. And I'll talk about gaming for 1 second, because this answers the question. My son he was involved in Fortnite, and because I give them a certain amount of freedom. And then my girlfriend was telling me, I was like, he's so belligerent and so this and that. And she was telling me about the psychological persuasive gaming and the gamification, and how they actually hire, like Epic Games and these other places will hire psychologists to see what 12-year-old boys do as far as they're watching, or boys and girls, in order to get them addicted, because visually they need to kind of come back. So, and Facebook knows that about us, you know, and so we are constantly being manipulated by media. So why does Planned Parenthood want to have a Disney princess that has had an abortion? Why they want to be able to get people as young as possible to think that it's an original idea that they have to have an abortion or whatever their agenda is, but it's not an original idea. It's not an original idea. And so, but the younger, the better. And then they can sell that. And, you know, with the whole idea of motherhood, if you go back to Planned Parenthood, they used media too. They wanted my Aunt Claire to believe that it's not noble to be inside a house and raise kids. It's just not. And it comes back to actual communist philosophy, because we're not as productive. Remember, oh, you need to do something else before you have a baby. We're not as productive if we're in the home, according to this theory, right? And so that is kind of where that all comes from, and kind of why they would want that. Of course they want that. We're battling for the minds of the next generation.
Yeah, no, I think that's really powerful what you're saying, because I mean, I agree with you. I think that you know, maybe they would get rid of princesses if they could, but the reason that they can't is that, as you say, we love them. We're going to always love them. It doesn't matter what they do. And it doesn't matter if they try to say like, oh, well, Wonder Woman is a princess, you know, and, you know, this person, it's like, no, we don't want that. You know, we might want it, but that's not princess to us. You know, Cinderella is princess, or, you know, Little Mermaid is princess. And I think it's kind of like, well, if you can't beat it, then use it. And I think that, you know, that's really powerful. It's good to know, you know.
Granted, I don't believe in abortion, but I feel like if more people who were focused on, like more creators that were focused on like the positives would have that idea and create more content that was more in line with, you know, noble kind of traditional things regarding, like, you know, being a mother, for example, or giving birth. Like the concept of giving birth alone, to me, it's bigger than this. This is about creating anything. And I will tell you, after having an abortion, like that sense of abortion, like trying to complete things even was difficult. And I know that sounds crazy, but it was just this cycle that kind of keeps perpetuating itself. And I believe that this aspect of not being able to fully birth things is just constantly being kind of taught to us, you know, like cutting things off, not going through the process. And, you know.
Yeah, well, one of the things I wanted to also ask you about is, you know, in your article that you wrote about this, you call the biological mothers of your children princesses. And I'm wondering if you can sort of speak more about that. And I'm wondering if it has to do kind of with what you're saying about this idea of creation. But, you know, what is it? Why are they princesses in your eyes?
So there's 3 mothers. There's 5 kids, but there's 3 mothers. Mm-hmm. 2 of them are not alive anymore. One, we don't know where she is. So one was 13 when she got pregnant, and was in Guatemala, and in an area where actually there's a lot of gang activity and a lot of women actually are killed or trafficked. And she, I believe, is still alive, but we are not sure where she is or if she wants to find us, but we know who she is. And she gave birth to her baby and gave her baby up to foster care for adoption. And we have Matea, who's amazing. Her name means gift from God. And so I'll just describe them and kind of get back to then my 3 children from Ethiopia. Their mother, Bayush was her name. She died from TB, but as a complication from AIDS in Ethiopia. And then my son, Alec, his mom also abandoned him at 2 days. She is presumed dead because she also had AIDS. And I mentioned them being princesses in a sense because, you know, them giving birth in the midst of their poverty. I mean, in some of these countries, they actually had the option. In Guatemala, they didn't, you know, was noble in its own right. But what they gave to the world with these children, my children are exceptional, and their children are exceptional. And I feel that, you know, women, you know, I mean, these are saints, you know, future saints, future, you know, the kids that are being born or lost to abortion. I believe our world would be a better place if they were born because, you know, scientists, great philosophers, authors, artists, you know, are not here. So these women, to me, persevering through pregnancy and moving forward, it's noble. And then also for me personally, I feel in my heart a responsibility, like a good responsibility, to make sure that their daughters understand, you know, their mothers and what they had gone through, and then persevere to become women who are women of life. And I don't just mean just giving birth. I mean speaking life into other people. I mean encouraging other people for life-affirming things. Being willing to sacrifice. The aspect of sacrifice is so lost so many times in these feminist philosophies. Like, why would you sacrifice yourself? Like, why would you ever go through the sacrifice? But that oftentimes is how we become truly strong and get these characteristics. So anyhow, so the women, the mothers, I just feel a very strong connection to. my children from Ethiopia, before I even knew that I was adopting them, I had a dream of this woman with these brown hands. It was a kind of a vision in the middle of the day. And she had these oranges that she was handing me. And I was like, wow, that's an interesting little catnap dream. And I thought maybe it was because we were going to be in the process of adopting the mother handing me her children or something. And I didn't know how many oranges, but a year went by. We had adopted 3 children. And I remember, and they were just starting to speak English because it took almost that long to really get the language going. So I turned to my daughter, Grace, who was 9 at the time. And I said, out of curiosity, because she has a long African name, what was your nickname? Because her name is Ejigayu. We call her Grace, but her middle name is her African name. And she's like, oh, mommy, she goes, and there was a fruit bowl. She goes, my mommy called me that. And she pointed to oranges. Little oranges is what so it's just sort of been like a spiritual, amazing thing. And I believe when I say redemption, to be the mom, and it's not easy to raise any kid, but to raise these adopted kids, to think of her, Bayush, and we speak of her a lot in her memory, like, let's live a life that affirms life in everything, affirms the process. With Bayush handing me oranges and me somehow feeling this, and knowing that, and so I just feel like for women to encourage them birthing, what do you have on your heart that you want to birth? And making sure that we speak that into other people, but especially if they're pregnant with a child, to explain to them that this is a season of labor. Yes, it's going to be hard. Maybe even after you have the baby, it's going to be hard, but we will be there to help you. And we as women need to extend ourselves to other women to help them.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one thing I definitely want to ask you about, and we're coming close to the end, but not quite, is you said before that you are working on a book about Cinderella. Can you tell us a little bit about what that's all about?
So the working title is called The Cinderella Mindset, because I wanted to address some of those things that I mentioned, which was how she's misunderstood, and just actually get more into, like, who is she? I do take some liberty, and I start talking about her prior to being, with the step family and everything. But I really talk about, like, okay, she sings through the smoke. What does that look like in your life, to sing through the smoke? What does it look like to try to tend to a raging fire? What does it look like to have to move on in a darker place through your grief? What does and when somebody is telling you not to move forward into your destiny, like, what do you do? So I start to say things, because I believe this is true, that what Cinderella was, I mean, she, like I mentioned before, she basically kicked down a door. She's like, I'm going to go to that. I mean, so the feminists will describe her as being somebody who's weak, but she kicked down a door twice. She had to come down and present herself in some way to the king or the prince as they came down with the shoe. As other people, and that's another topic, people will try to take away your identity and try to fit into what is supposed to be yours. And are you going to sit in the back room? Are you going to sit in the back room when it's there? Or are you going to push your way and persevere? So that is one of the books that I'm still working on. And then I'm writing fairy tales. I'm just continuing to write fairy tales that are like pro-life in a sense, but with the style of old classical fairy tales. And I actually wrote one that I really believe is a tribute to the daughter that I aborted. I think it was a daughter. And it was really cathartic. And so I believe strongly that we can sit here and we can point fingers and saying, oh my gosh, Planned Parenthood's doing this, Fortnite is doing that, they're all doing this in the games of our kids. Or we can rise up and create things that are really great messages. I mean, I love media, and I think there are so many great messages. There's great stories, and there's great movies, and I love media. And so, but I believe there's too many people pointing the fingers negatively rather than creating. And I feel like I can sit back and just go, can you believe they're doing that? Or write a bunch of fairy tales that I feel like, who knows, maybe somebody will read and it'll hit the heart of one child even that, grows up to have another child that'll be like the president or, or something,
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I love the idea of writing new fairy tales because I think,
Yeah.
that's what Disney is trying to do right now, except they're off on the wrong track, right? They want to rewrite fairy tales so that they align with their ideology, with this sort of feminist ideology, and they're making movies that aren't really based on fairy tales, but they have the kind of fairy tale world involved. Like Brave is always my
Yeah.
example of that. That's not a real fairy tale from the past, but it definitely draws on all of these kind of fairy tale tropes, but it's horrible. And so tell us, where can we read these fairy tales, and where can we find you, and tell everybody, and I think you also have an online church, and tell us where we can find you.
Okay, so when I do encourage this online church planting, and what that means, I'll just say it briefly, is that people, millennials, aren't going into the churches are continuing, not to say this is not against traditional churches, because we like the community, but until the body of Christ heads into media and starts to pursue connecting with people like this. We have 2 billion people that come onto Facebook alone every single month. I mean, we have the ability to head in there and to connect with people who they're not going to walk into the old, into the churches if we want that new demographic. They really aren't. And so what are Christians going to do? We have to adapt to the culture. And so I encourage, when I say build an online church, build a social congregation, build your brand as Christian men and women in order to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ. And for me, it's going to be fairy tales and, pro-life feminism, basically, and adoption or whatever. But for other people, it may be something else. And so I encourage people to do that. As far as how to contact me, I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Deanna Falchook. I also did start, I have a Facebook group that is really fun that's called Pro-Life Princesses. You have to kind of, log in and get approved, and I'll approve you. And then I have a blog that we're just starting. It's not complete yet, but it does have some of these fairy tales up, and it's just prolifeprincesses.com or prolifeprincess.com.
Amazing. Well, I will add all of that to the description. I think I put definitely put your article already in the description, and link your Facebook, but I will add that. Actually, if you send that to me after, I will end it. I will add it to the bottom of this so people can find you when they watch the video. I have one last question, which is, do you still sing?
I do still sing. Well, I haven't been in my band for years, but I sing around the house.
Will you sing us a Cinderella song?
Oh my gosh.
Or part of it?
Okay. What is one of my favorite? Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay. A dream is a wish your heart makes when you're fast asleep. In dreams you can lose your heartache. Whatever you wish for, you keep. Have faith in your dreams, and someday your rainbow will come shining through. No matter how your heart is grieving, if you keep on believing, the dreams that you wish will come true.
Doesn't get any better than that. Thank you so much. And thank you. I really appreciate you telling your story. I think it's so powerful and so important for people to hear it. Thank you. So Deanna Falchook, thank you so much for being on the show. It was a pleasure to have you. And for all of those watching, please go and check out all of those amazing things, the fairy tales and the church and the article and all of that. And please subscribe here so that you don't miss anything else. And we will see you again very soon here on Princess State of Mind. Thanks for watching.